Good morning. Life is to be related. A beautiful, uh, small little book by Vimala Thakar. Several talks of her that she gave in Australia in 1982. This is a talk from the 10th of April, 1982. The mental movement is a repetitive and mechanistic movement. The content of the mind is thought, knowledge, and experience. We have seen that psychological time is a creation of the mind. The mind creates concepts, and with the help of them, it relates itself to the physical reality, so we live in a dual way. We live with the physical reality, getting related through the sense organs, and we get related to the concepts, the ideas, the knowledge that the human race has evolved and developed. Simultaneously, we live on the conceptual and the physical level, and man has to learn to use thoughts and ideas. In order to use the concepts, the symbols, the ideas, the thoughts, the mind has got to be very sharp, competent, and efficient, and not to enter into wishful thinking, not to enter into daydreaming, into a world of make believe. We have to learn to be present and mindful of whatever we do. Otherwise, in the darkness of inattention, habits grow like mushrooms, and we go on repeating the habits mechanically, automatically, and we live in a state of inattention most of the time. Habits makes us go through a mechanical movement inattentively. We brush our teeth, we take a shower or a bath in a state of inattention. We take our meals preoccupied with other thoughts, and every moment that is spent in inattention is not truly lived. To live is to move sensitively, alertly, with awareness, with attention. Unless there is a relationship of sensitivity, of attention, of awareness, there is no life. Life is a movement of relationships. If we live casually, carelessly, doing things haphazardly, then the quality of life that we live becomes very poor. It is the quality of life that should be enriched. Minds have to be educated so that we can live in this mad, violent, and aggressive society sanely, fearlessly, and keeping our initiative intact. Education of the mind and of the body is necessary. Let us turn to the other aspect of the mind. I said that the mental movement is a repetitive movement because it is repeating the past. It qualifies and modifies the past as the children qualify and modify what they have inherited from their parents and continue with it. On the mental movement, the past enters into the present. The present qualifies and modifies the past and continues or projects towards the future. It is the past that is traveling. Thought is the past. Thought is tethered to the past because without words there will be no thought. Words are a creation of the past. Their meanings are chiseled out of associations of emotions and ideas. The atmosphere around the words, created by traditions and conventions, are all the product of the past. As thought cannot function without the word, and the mind cannot function without the thought, there is no freedom on the mental level, no freedom from the past. One is trying to see the facts as they are. Please do remember that one has nothing against the past or its inheritance. Along with the old symbols handed over to us by our elders, we create new symbols. The age of science has created many, and we handle and relate them to the concepts, and we live on the conceptual level of reality. And this is our life. If we can see the symbols as representing the reality, and we do not mistake them for the reality, then there will be no bondage, no fear. What happens is that we get so used to the symbols that the symbols and the concepts become the reality for us. We see how psychological time is created. In reality, there is no time. Life is time free. Life is an isness that ever has been there and that shall ever be there. In our efforts to relate to this gigantic infinite isness, we created measures. Psychological time is a measure which man lives by. We say today, tomorrow, yesterday. We measure by the measurements that we have created. In the eternity of life, there is nothing like a minute or an hour, nothing like a day or a year. It is only pure, eternal isness. We so much get used to the measurements that we feel that the hundreds or thousands of years that we have counted are the reality. And then we forget that life is time-free. It is timelessness. Obviously, that is what eternity means. It defies measurements. Measurements are useful to us as our cultural toys, as our currency for collective relationships and behavior. We can use the time and symbols and play with them. But if we forget that life is timelessness and measurelessness, then the idea of tomorrow will create fear and prevents us from living today fully. And we go on postponing. We forget that tomorrow is a concept existing only in our minds. In life, there is nothing like tomorrow, but we use the concepts for procrastination, postponement of decisions and actions, and we go on cheating ourselves this way. Life is in today, in the now, in this moment. The tomorrows and yesterdays exist only in the human brain. We forget that, and therefore our habits of mental lethargy, habits of postponement, of pushing the responsibility of taking a decision away from us. This dissipates energy, and therefore our lives are not as vital and vigorous as they can be. They don't have the passion required for it. It has dissipated in postponement and procrastination. We see plants being born, seeds being sown. We see them sprouting. We see the trees growing, decaying, and dying. But as soon as the I, the me, relates to the process of birth, growth, decay, and death to itself, it begins to shrink and feels afraid of death. When we are confronted with the fact that there is no time to get afraid, we have to act. Life demands action. So there we act instantaneously. But when we play with the idea in our mind, sitting in an easy chair or talking with friends, then the idea, the word death, will stimulate fear. What I'm trying to convey to you is the necessity of educating the mind to function alertly and sensitively and understand its own mechanism. We have seen that human beings have self-consciousness. We can think and at the same time be aware why we are thinking. We can be aware of what is going, of what, excuse me, we can be aware of what it is going to lead to. It is a multi-directional and multi-dimensional consciousness that is functioning, operating in us. Now we have seen that with the help of that, the mental movement is being related to the past. Whenever we have to move and to express ourselves through the mind, we better be careful and learn to function precisely, accurately, and not indulge in mental movement when it is unnecessary or when the movement is not warranted. On the physical, material, and psychological level, an orderly movement of the mind is necessary. No addictions to thoughts, feelings, and sentiments. No attachment to our own reactions. These are all maladjustments, and we will suffer unnecessarily when we indulge them. Much suffering and misery is created by our own mind. The misery caused by starvation and illiteracy is there in the world, but I am not talking to the starving ones. I would not talk to them about a psychic revolution, but say that we have to exert ourselves and create an economic context where the basic needs of every human being will be provided for decently and sanely, and living without any inequality. For the have-not countries, the revolution will firstly have to be on the socio-economic level. But those who are living in wealthy countries, those who are not suffering from starvation or poverty, to them I address the words for a psychic transformation which seems to be necessary for further human growth. Thought cannot take in its embrace the wholeness of life. Thought cannot create love, humility, innocence. It cannot cultivate affection, real concern, or compassion. These are beyond the reach of the thought structure. When we realize that the mental movement is organically very much limited, that it cannot be free from the past, and that God, the divine, the totality, or what you will, cannot be reached through this mechanistic movement of the mind, then what do? We have to use the mental movement on the material, the physical, and the psychological level. But when it comes to the other side, the human relationships and our relationships with this mysterious universe around us, then what do? We use the ego, the I consciousness, the me, a contrivance created by man, very usefully. But we see that it cannot take us any further because it brings with itself the total human past. It brings the words, the thoughts, the ideas, and again it starts measuring the unknown with terms of the known. The mind carries the trap with it, the trap of the past references, ideologies, and conclusions, be they from the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Gita, or the Bible, Zen, or the Koran. The trap of the past travels with the mind, and the present or unknown is pounced upon to identify it, to give it a name and convert it into either a piece of knowledge or an experience. So beware of the mind and the trap of the mind, the past, symbols, concepts, etc. This morning, after having seen the perceptual and the conceptual level, we are turning towards the trans-conceptual reality, to the trans-perceptual aspect of our life, aspect of the universe around us. How do we know that there is a trans-conceptual aspect to our lives? Do we have to take it upon somebody's words? Surely not. One can watch the phenomenon of sleep, or rather, one can contemplate, reflect upon this issue of sleep. 1/3 of our lives is spent in sleeping. Does the I, the me, the ego function in sound sleep? Are we all the time conscious? I am sleeping. I'm making an effort to sleep. Or does the entrance into the dimension of profound sleep depend upon the unconditional relaxation of the I? The body relaxes, and so does the I. The ego is not functioning as the center controlling the sleep. In the so-called waking hours, the ego is sitting tight at the center. The I consciousness, the center manipulated by the human race for the sake of functioning on the physical plane, controls the function of the mind and the senses, controls the objects and the relationships and regulates them. That is what we call the waking hours of our day. But in profound sleep, the I is not sitting at the center. It has gone into complete abeyance, and in the complete abeyance of the ego, there is profound sleep. We don't know that we are sleeping, we're completely relaxed. Now, in sleep consciousness, the control of the I sense over the periphery of our lives, over the nature of our activities, over the content of life, the I has gone into abeyance. It exerts no control, no regulations, and yet life moves. Life moves. There are no concepts, no symbols, no controller, No director, nothing. It is a spontaneous movement of life that goes on within. And we come back out of sleep and we say, what a great sleep I had. And if somebody asks, what happened in your good sleep? Then we will say, how can I tell you? I was sleeping. I wasn't functioning. So without the functioning of the ego, it is not only possible to survive, but it's very possible to continue living. Life is not suspended even for a fraction of a second while we are sleeping. In the unconditional relaxation of the body, which is not taking which is not taking in any perception, in the complete abeyance or spontaneous non-action of the mind, when there are no concepts, no symbols, no reactions, the movement of life still persists. I'm giving a very simple example so that we may be able to catch the implications of what I am further going to say. There is a trans-perceptual level of our being and an area of or field of our life where the mind does not function and yet we live. There is an emptiness in the mind, no movement of thought or emotions, no pressure, no neurological tension in the body or a thought, because movement of a thought creates tensions, and movement of emotions create pressures that are felt by the stomach, by the eyes, and by the brain. It's fun to watch and note down our observations of what happens to us when we feel angry or jealous, depressed, excited, frustrated, or ambitious. Just to watch the movement of ambition and see what it does to the vital parts of our being. Note them down, then it becomes our own discovery, not borrowed from books. Understanding becomes the substance of our being. Knowledge remains a burden in memory. That is the difference between the two. So understanding becomes the substance of our being, and knowledge remains a burden in memory. That is the difference between the two. Understanding becoming the substance of our being helps the total growth of our being. It brings about transformation. There is a transconceptual and transperceptual level of our being, a dimension of life. What happens in sleep consciousness can happen in the submission of meditation. Meditation implies a state of being where in waking hours one is living in that inner emptiness, inner space, uncluttered by the movement of thought, totally relaxed, both chemically and neurologically, responding only when a response is warranted. Meditation is a state of being awake, alert, and yet the brain is absolutely quiet. It is not active. The mind is alert, but does not react. The inner space is called emptiness. We can use that word. There is an emptiness of space between you and me, but that emptiness is not void. It is full of many energies. We cannot see or perhaps touch them with our senses, but that's a reflection on the limited nature of our senses. It is not a reflection on the nature of those energies. They are there, right now inside the room, though we cannot see, feel, or touch them. In the same way, there is an inner space within us, like the space outside, where there are innumerable virgin energies, untapped, unconditioned, unexplored by man, undefined by verbalization. So maybe till here for today. Much beautiful food for thought. Have a great day.